It was a day like any other in the village of Itori. The air hung heavy with humidity, a constant buzz of insects filling the silence, and the trees whispered secrets to those willing to listen. But that was before she arrived, before the red cloth, before everything changed. You see, the villagers of Itori had never believed in magic. They'd heard the stories of shamans who could speak to the spirits, of healers who could bring the dead back to life, but they never took them seriously. Until her. The girl's name was Nanya, and she arrived at the village in the dead of night, her feet silent on the damp earth. Wrapped around her shoulders was a red cloth, a blood-stained reminder of something ancient. She had walked for days, her feet raw and her spirit weary. But she knew where she had to go. The village of Itori held the key to her past, and she was determined to uncover the truth. Nanya's parents had been villagers once, long ago, before they disappeared into the whispers of the forest. They had left her in the care of strangers, the young child too afraid to ask questions. She had heard their names spoken in hushed tones, heard the rumors about their powers that could raise the dead and curse the living. Now, she was here to find answers. When Nanya arrived at the village, she was met with cold eyes. The villagers looked at her with a mix of fear and disdain. Her red cloth was a symbol of something they had long abandoned, something they feared. But Nanya didn't care. She was there for one reason, to find the truth about the powers she had inherited, powers she had never asked for. As the sun began to set on the village of Itori, the air grew thick with tension. The elders gathered around the bonfire, whispering among themselves, their voices barely audible above the crackling flames. They had heard of the girl's arrival. They knew she had come to claim what was rightfully hers, what they had once rejected. "We cannot allow this," one elder whispered, his hands trembling as he clutched his staff. "She must be stopped." But the chief, a tall man with a deep scar running down his face, shook his head. "If she is truly the daughter of the forest, there's no stopping her. We must confront her now, before it's too late." And so, under the cover of night, the villagers went to Nanya. They surrounded her at the edge of the forest, their faces twisted with fear and hatred. "You must leave," the chief commanded. "Your powers are dangerous. You are not welcome here." But Nanya didn't flinch. She had heard the stories too, stories of betrayal, of magic used for evil. She knew what they were afraid of. "I am not here to hurt you," she said, her voice calm but firm. "I only seek to understand. My parents were from this village. They gave me this gift. I am not the monster you fear." The villagers recoiled, their eyes widening in terror. "We don't want your kind here," the chief spat. "Your powers are a curse. You are not welcome in Itori." And with that, they turned their backs on her, walking away into the night. Nanya stood in the clearing, the weight of rejection heavy on her shoulders. She had hoped, foolishly, that they would accept her. But now, she understood the truth. They had rejected her, and in doing so, they had sealed their fate. Nanya turned toward the forest, her heart pounding in her chest. She could feel the magic rising within her, swelling like a storm. The spirits of the forest were awakening, and they were angry. The village of Itori had rejected her powers. Now, the forest would remind them of the price they would pay. The sky darkened over Itori, and then, the drums began to beat. It started slowly, barely audible at first, like the faint tapping of distant footsteps. But as the night grew deeper, the sound grew louder, more urgent. It came from the forest, echoing through the trees, a rhythmic pulse that rattled the bones of the village. The elders gathered once again around the bonfire, their faces pale, their hands trembling as they listened to the familiar sound of the drums. They had heard this sound before, many years ago, when the village was cursed. They had prayed it would never return. But it had. The chief stood, his posture rigid. His eyes were dark with worry, his voice low and steady as he addressed the elders. "We cannot ignore this. The drums are a sign. They were used to summon us before. The spirits of the forest are calling." "Why now?" one of the elders asked, his voice barely more than a whisper. "Why after all these years?" "Because of her," the chief replied, his gaze falling to the ground. "She's awakened something. We rejected her, and now we must pay the price." But none of them dared to speak the name aloud. The girl, Nanya, the one who had returned with the red cloth. The drums beat louder still. The earth beneath the village shook. The very air hummed with an ancient power, one that had lain dormant for far too long. Nanya, standing at the edge of the forest, felt the pulse of the drums in her chest. It was like a heartbeat, a rhythm that called to her, stirred something deep within her. She closed her eyes, the wind brushing against her skin, and let the sound wash over her. The forest had come alive, responding to the call of the spirits. It was time. She had no doubt that the village would come for her. They would come with their fear and their hatred. They would come to destroy what they could not control. But Nanya was not afraid. She had walked this path before. She had known this moment would come, and she would be ready. Back in the village, panic began to spread. People whispered to each other, their eyes darting nervously toward the forest. The elders, who once commanded respect, now appeared helpless, their words lost in the wind. The chief stood alone, staring out toward the darkened trees, the rhythmic pounding of the drums reverberating through his bones. He remembered the stories his grandmother had told him when he was a boy, the tales of the forest spirits and the shamans who could command them. Never reject the forest. Never cast away its children. If you do, the forest will come for you, and it will never forget. The chief swallowed hard, the weight of his grandmother's words pressing down on him. He had dismissed them, thinking they were just stories. But now, as the drums continued their steady beat, he knew the truth. Nanya had awakened the forest, and now it was angry. The villagers gathered in the center of the village, watching the flames of the bonfire flicker and dance. The drums, still echoing in the distance, felt like a countdown, each beat drawing them closer to a reckoning they could no longer avoid. A man stepped forward from the crowd, his face drawn with fear. "We must do something. The spirits will not be appeased. We have to stop her." But deep down, he knew the truth. The forest would not spare them. Nanya had been cast out, rejected for her power, and now the village would face the consequences. As the night wore on, the drums continued their relentless beat. The villagers huddled together, staring into the darkness, waiting for something, anything, to break the silence. And then, as the first light of dawn began to creep over the horizon, a figure appeared in the distance, moving toward the village. Nanya. Her red cloth billowed around her like a flame, her eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. The forest followed her, a mass of shadows and whispers that moved in time with the beat of the drums. The villagers froze, their hearts in their throats. She was here, and deep beneath the village, in the hidden shrine, the spirits began to stir. The village of Itori had always prided itself on its peaceful ways, but beneath the surface, there were things they had tried to bury. Secrets that, once uncovered, would destroy everything they had worked for. The shrine, hidden away in the deepest part of the village, had long been abandoned. The elders had told the villagers that it was a place of the old ways, a remnant of a time better forgotten. But the truth was far darker than they could ever admit. For Nanya, the shrine was calling to her. She had felt its pull the moment she arrived, the power that vibrated through the earth and whispered in the wind. It was the power of her ancestors, the power they had tried to suppress. The same power they had rejected. And now, as the drums fell silent, as the village waited in fear, the spirits beneath the shrine stirred, awakening from centuries of slumber. Nanya walked slowly toward the heart of the village, her feet moving with purpose. She wasn't alone, at her side was the forest, its spirits gathering around her like a dark cloud. The villagers watched in horror, too afraid to move. They knew what was coming, and they knew they were powerless to stop it. As Nanya reached the shrine, she stopped and turned toward the chief, his face pale with fear. "Do you remember this place?" she asked, her voice combat-filled with an ancient strength. The chief stepped back, his eyes wide. No, we sealed it. We buried it long ago. It should never have been disturbed." "You sealed it to protect yourselves," Nanya replied, her eyes locking with his. "But you never understood. You never knew the truth." She turned toward the stone entrance of the shrine, her hand reaching out to touch the cold, weathered surface. The village had thought it was a place of death, of curses and dark rituals. But to Nanya, it was home. The ground trembled beneath their feet as the door to the shrine creaked open. The villagers gasped as the air shifted, thick with the weight of something ancient, something powerful. The chief stepped forward, his voice shaking. "You don't have to do this, Nanya. Whatever your parents told you, it's a lie. The power inside that shrine is evil. It has always been evil." But Nanya shook her head. "You were the ones who chose fear over knowledge. You were the ones who shut this place away, who buried its truth. Now, the spirits are awake, and they are hungry. Nanya stepped inside, feeling the power surge through her veins. The spirits whispered to her, their voices barely audible, but unmistakably clear. As she reached the center of the shrine, the earth beneath her feet cracked open, revealing a hidden chamber. In the center of the chamber was an altar. It was covered in ancient symbols, runes that no one in the village could read. But Nanya knew what they meant. She had been taught. She had been chosen. The spirits were rising, their power flooding into her like a raging storm. The village, the people who had rejected her, were nothing now. She was the vessel, the one chosen to carry the weight of the forest's fury. The ground shook violently, and the villagers screamed as the earth split open, swallowing whole houses, trees, then lives. The shrine, once thought to be a place of darkness, was now a gateway, one that the village could never close. Nanya's voice echoed through the chamber. "You were afraid of what you didn't understand," she said, her voice filled with both sorrow and fury. "Now you will learn. The forest doesn't forget." Outside, the village was no more. What had once been a thriving, peaceful place was now a smoldering ruin. The spirits had claimed it, and Nanya had become the conduit for their wrath. The villagers, those who had survived, fled into the wilderness, their hearts heavy with regret. But it was too late for them. The forest had already taken what it was owed, and Nanya stood in the ruins of her past, her heart filled with a deep, unshakable sense of belonging. The village had rejected her power, her birthright, and in doing so, they had sealed their fate. The village had been torn apart, the land swallowed by the earth itself. It was a scene of desolation, but in the midst of the chaos, Nanya stood tall, unshaken by the destruction. And yet, despite everything, there was something that gnawed at Nanya's heart, a feeling she couldn't shake. She had avenged herself, avenged her ancestors, but in doing so, she had left a path of devastation in her wake. The villagers had rejected her for so long, and now they were gone. But was their destruction truly what the forest had intended? The spirits had been clear, she had to embrace her role, to become the vessel for their wrath. The village, the people who once feared her, had been consumed by the forest's power. There were no survivors, at least, none that she could find. As Nanya wandered through the ruins, her gaze fell upon something unexpected, a small, weathered shrine, half buried beneath the rubble. It wasn't one of the main shrines, but rather a forgotten offering place, one that hadn't seen attention in years. She knelt before it, brushing away the dust, and saw something that made her heart skip a beat, a single, cracked mask. It was an old mask, carved with symbols she recognized, symbols of the ancient forest, symbols of her lineage. She felt a strange pull toward it, as if the mask was calling her. She reached for it, lifting it gently, and as soon as her fingers touched its surface, a surge of energy ran through her. The forest responded, its presence now even more intense, more overwhelming. The mask was a relic of her ancestors, she realized, something they had used to communicate with the spirits. It was a symbol of power, of connection. But as the forest's energy surged through her, she understood, the forest was not done with its reckoning. It had taken the village, but it was still thirsty, still hungry for more. Nanya stood, the mask in her hands, her eyes staring into the distance. The winds picked up, and for a moment, she could hear the faintest whispers. The spirits were restless, angry, and they wanted something from her. They were not merely vengeful, they were demanding. And their demands were clear. The forest wanted her to make a choice. The chief had once warned her that the power of the forest came at a price. He had told her that the spirits would demand more from her than she could ever give. He had been right, but she hadn't understood the depth of his warning until now. It was not enough to simply destroy the village. And now that the village was no more, she had to decide what her next step would be. She knew she couldn't leave the forest behind. Not anymore. It had become a part of her. But as the spirits circled around her, their whispers growing louder, she realized something that had eluded her until now. Her vengeance had been part of a greater plan, one set in motion long before her birth. The spirits had been dormant for too long, and it was she, Nanya, who was meant to bring them back into the world of the living, to make them whole again. And in doing so, she had released something far darker than she had anticipated. The spirits, now free to roam the earth, would demand more than she had imagined. She was the keeper of the forest's hunger. And as the last remnants of the village crumbled behind her, Nanya made her decision. She would embrace the forest's power completely. She would become its queen, its guide, its ultimate vessel. She placed the mask on her face, the symbols glowing faintly as the power surged through her. The forest roared in approval, its energy enveloping her, transforming her. She felt her senses heighten, the spirits flowing through her veins. Nanya had become more than human. Nanya knew that her actions had set something in motion far greater than her revenge. The people of neighboring villages had heard the stories, tales of a village destroyed by an unseen force, of the power of the forest unleashed. But they didn't believe the rumors. They thought it was just a legend, a tale spun to scare children. How could they know that the forest was alive, that its hunger could devour whole villages in a single night? The first signs of the reckoning came as a dense fog crept over the land. It was thick, unnatural, and it carried with it the sound of whispers, the voices of the spirits. They were everywhere, speaking in tongues that no living person could understand. And as long as Nanya lived, the spirits would never be appeased. As she looked out across the land, Nanya felt a strange sorrow in her heart. The villagers, once her people, were gone, consumed by their own fear. She had become what they had feared most. And yet, she couldn't bring herself to feel regret. The land, the spirits, and the people had all paid the price for their ignorance. She could sense the next village, its people blissfully unaware of the darkness creeping ever closer. They would be the next to feel the spirit's wrath. But it wasn't just vengeance that drove her. It was a deep, unshakable hunger, one that she could never satisfy. With a deep breath, Nanya turned toward the village. The whispers of the forest grew louder, the spirits urging her forward. The people would never understand what she had become. They would never understand the price of rejecting what was theirs by birthright. But that didn't matter anymore. Nanya had become the forest's queen, and the world would soon learn that its hunger could never be denied. The spirits had been freed, and now they would reign. And the village, the world, would fall under their wrath. Make sure to like the video and subscribe as the stories are just about to get better.